Hi, welcome to Story Time with Dave Booker. Appreciate you being here with me. Today we're going to continue on with Sheriff in a Small Town 3. And it's a warm day today outside, but we're going to go to a time when it's chilly. So we're going to read Cold Comfort, cool down a little bit. Town was cold. It had been cold for a week. In the courthouse, the gas furnace was going full blast and still wasn't enough. Rocky had moved his family into the home in town. The old farmhouse was drafty for the winter. You'd have to get some storm windows, but in the meantime, it was nice to have the family home to go to. Rocky had sent Talbot home to ensure his family was warm enough. Their place had an old wood burning furnace, and he was going through a lot of wood. Fortunately, his home was small, so it worked pretty well. The rooms upstairs were the warmest, and they had practically begun to live up there except for cooking. Folks around town were doing their best to keep warm and mostly stayed inside. Rocky slipped on his scarf, leather jacket, gloves, fur-lined hat, and lined overboots. Pulled the scarf up so that it covered his mouth and nose and ventured out into the frozen tundra. He let the squad car idle and heat up a bit before heading out. He was going to do a drive around town, then hit the back areas, and finally check on the farms farthest out. Phone lines had been transferred to his home, and Agnes had the portable set so she could relay anything he should be informed about. The gauge slowly creeped up, and Rocky engaged the car into drive. Driving slowly, he headed around town. Most of the shops were shut except the general store and Joe's garage. Saw an odd radiance from inside the garage. The flickering lights and orange glow through the frosted window alarmed Rocky. Speeding up, he skidded to a halt outside the garage, leapt out of the car, slipped and fell, recovered, and then skated to the door. He opened to an interior that was warm and welcoming. What had been glowing was a large canister that was glowing red. Its chimney was attached to a flue going through the roof. Rocky recognized it as a barracks heater. It used liquid gas and would be effective in heating up the space of the garage. Joe was sitting behind the desk with a stack of pennies in front of him. Joe looked up with a big smile. Picked it up at the Army Navy store in Beaumont. I checked the almanac and it said we were in for a cold winter and I figured it'd help. Rocky undid his coat. You do know it's adjustable, don't you? You don't need to have it glowing cherry red. Joe's grin got wider. Yeah, but watch this. He put a penny on his thumb and flipped it expertly so it landed with a thwack dead center on top. The coin began to glow and then swiftly melted. Great, isn't it? Rocky shrugged. Yeah, it's great. A great way for you to blow the place up and you with it. Joe flipped another penny, watched it melt with the excited eyes of a child, then adjusted the gas hole to bring the fire under control. Yeah, I guess you're right. I never had one of these before. I was talking to some of the vets once, and they were talking about one of these they had in Alaska. Said it would keep you warm in the coldest weather. They also said they used to melt their spare change on it. I just had to try it out. Rocky shook his head in wonder. Joe was just a big kid at heart, and it looked like he was always going to be. Turning to leave, he grabbed a scoop of cat litter and spread it out the door, flinging it towards the car. See ya, Joe. Don't burn the place down. Joe leaned back and closed his eyes as he waved goodbye to Rocky. At least somebody was comfortable in all this cold. Rocky drove around and the side streets and saw Lori Guernsey shopping wood. She was a thin, frail-looking girl of 20 who lived with her grandparents. She was having a hard time with a heavy axe. Rocky pulled over, got out, and took over. He gathered the wood she had managed to chop and brought it inside and got the fire going. For the next hour, he chopped wood. Lori maintained the fire in the fireplace and adjusted the flue for maximum heat. Grandparents sat close, thankfully absorbing the warmth. Lori knelt on the couch and looked outside the window, watching Rocky swinging the axe easily. An idea occurred to her, and she ran into the kitchen, put the kettle on for making him a pot of tea. Rocky split almost half the cord and gathered a good supply in a blanket from the trunk of the squad car. Dragging it inside, he stacked it neatly and acknowledged the thanks from the old couple. Lori came in with a hot mug of tea and some sweet biscuits. Rocky was invited to rest a bit and warm himself. Well, he was warm already from the chopping, but sat a while and talked to them. His first gulp of tea made him gasp and choke. Laura leaned over and whispered in his ear, "I put a dash of Grandpa's whiskey in there to help you stay warm." She looked at him with a wide-eyed innocence combined with a sly smile. Rocky finished the tea and felt ready to face the coldest onslaught the day could offer. Thanking them for their hospitality, he got up and to leave. At the door, he looked back for a moment at the three hovering around a blazing fire, warm at last and comfortable. He made a note to check on them in a day or two if the weather stayed cold. Inside the car, he drove off to check on the farthest section of his area. He planned to drive all the way up to Roger Wilkins' place. Roger's place was so remote it was rare that he or his family were seen unless it was a day for bringing produce to the co-op or cattle into market. He drove past the lake and was about to keep going when he saw a few children skating on the ice. He stopped and watched as they raced around playing ice hockey or just practicing going in circles. It amazed Rocky that children never seemed to got cold. They were wearing winter coats, scarves, and gloves, but they were playing as if it was a bright sunny day in May. Tom Cooper's son Billy was being dragged around by his huge golden retriever Dash. Rocky was surprised at the speed the dog could get running on ice. Rocky got out of the car to get a better view. His breath was fogging up the windows. Watching the kids, he looked around to see if any adults were there. Not that he really expected there to be. Kids around here were always out and about without parents, and parents wouldn't know where they were or what they had been up to until supper time. Dash had done a sharp turn that sent Billy sailing into a snowbank. Suddenly the dog was stationary with an inquisitive look on his face, his head cocked sideways, listening. Rocky's ears were muffled, but he heard the slight cracking sound. His voice boomed out as he told the kids to get off the ice immediately. They scurried as fast as little legs could take them. Something in his tone told them it was serious. Billy started to walk to Dash, but Rocky barked at him to go back. As Rocky had expected and feared, the ice beneath the dog shattered and Dash plunged into the icy water. Rocky leapt onto the ice, yelling at the children to remain where they were. Dash was trying to climb out, but couldn't get a grip. Rocky's slide took him near where the dog was, and he elbow crawled the rest of the way. Thinking fast, he knew he couldn't just grasp the dog and haul it out. Couldn't stand and couldn't get leverage. He whipped the scarf off his neck and crawled so that he was behind Dash. Passing a scarf underneath his arms and across Dash's chest, he tied it loosely and backed up, keeping the scarf taut. He hooked his toes in a tree root that was just above the waterline and pulled. Dash, sensing that he was being rescued, stopped paddling. Rocky pulled steadily. The scarf stretched and eventually tightened to the point where Dash slowly emerged from the water. When he rose from his frozen bath and lay on the ice, he was extremely cold and exhausted. Rocky slowly pulled the large dog towards himself and backed up to the shore. Dash was frozen stiff and getting colder by the second. Rocky reached the shore. He pulled swiftly, bringing the dog to him. Billy was beside Rocky, crying and yelling Dash's name. He was terrified because Dash wasn't moving. Rocky picked up the frozen dog and carried him into the car's warm interior. Billy got into the back seat crying, sure that his dog was dead. Rocky got a blanket and some rags out of the trunk and kneeled on the floor of the car. He handed Billy a couple of rags and had the boy help dry the dog off. He used the other rags to help dry the dog and give it a good massage. The sight of Dash's eyes rolling back alarmed Rocky, and he stepped up the massages. He pleaded with the animal, "Come on, boy, stay with me." He felt under the dog's chest fur to see if there was a heartbeat. Feeling a flutter, he continued to work harder. Billy was rubbing away, tears rolling down his cheeks. Kept looking at Rocky, wanting to ask if his dog was going to be all right. Couldn't get the question out because the answer might just be no. A sharp rise in his chest and increased pulse told Rocky Dash was back with them. He wrapped the dog in the blanket and told Billy his dog was going to make it. I'll drive you home. Called for the other children to get into the car and he'd take them all home. Got on the radio to Agnes to call Talbot in and have him put a sign up at the lake, do what he could to rope it off. A better thought occurred to him as he passed the heavy metal barrier. He'd close the lake off. He still wanted a sign put up, but by closing everything off, he felt a little more secure. He didn't want a chance someone falling in when no one was around there to get them out. After he dropped the children off home, he continued to drive slowly around the lake area. Several people waved from their homes and asked if he could bring them some items from the co-op. He finished plenty of items, all for making stews and soups. Finished with the local area, he drove to the farms. At the first one he was at, he asked them to start the grapevine and asked if anyone needed anything. Sitting in the warmth of the kitchen, he had a bowl of bean soup with large chunks of ham. Lou Stevenson did most of the cooking when he could. With 5 children, he felt his wife had enough on her hands, and on days when he wasn't in the field, he did it all. Cooking, helping with washing, and other chores. Molly, his wife, was a sweet, gentle soul who had been able to bring up 5 children without ever having to raise her voice. The children were all protective of their mother and took care of her as much as she took care of them. A call returned saying everyone was fine and thanking Rocky for checking in, but Roger Wilkins had asked if Rocky could swing by and give him a hand. Took Rocky a while to get there, since he had to drive slowly over icy roads. Arriving at the farm, Roger was emerging from the house. He was speaking to his wife over his shoulder. Well, keep trying. I know he couldn't be out doing many calls in this weather. Well, that's probably why he was not answering. He wants to stay snug and warm. Turning around, he raced down the stairs and bumped into Rocky. Hey, Sheriff, I appreciate you coming up here. I spent an hour trying to reach a new vet. I wish Doc Porter hadn't retired. The new guy only comes out when he feels like it. Rocky, hearing that Roger had called for a vet, wondered why Roger had asked him to come die. Roger was running up to a far barn, and Rocky had no chance to inquire. Arriving at the barn, Rocky walked into the warmth and what he considered the heavenly sense of farm animals. Roger laughed when he saw Rocky breathing deeply. Sheriff, you're the only non-farmer I know who likes the smells in here. You must have farming in your blood. Come on, I'll introduce you to our patient. In an empty stall between 2 sleek cows lay a doe who looked exhausted. Now, that she was pregnant was obvious. Rocky looked at Roger curiously. I didn't know you had deer here as well. Roger was unwinding some binder twine. I don't. She lives out by the forest. This morning, so I heard her outside my house bleeding. She came for help. Guess she's having a malpresentation and wants me to help get the baby out. Rocky was impressed. You know what to do? Roger shrugged. Hell no. But I had Doc Porter here a few times and my cows were in trouble. He always explained everything he did and why. I figure it's worth a shot to try and help her, especially since I can't get hold of that new bleeping vet. The cold wind accompanied Roger's wife as she brought in a bucket with hot water, some soap, and a towel for each of them. Rocky was hesitant. Roger, I don't know anything. I'll do anything for you, but I don't have a clue about something like this. Roger's eyes narrowed. I thought they taught you about emergency deliveries. Yeah, but on people. Roger laughed. Don't worry. I'll do the inside work. You just got to get ready to pull on the twine when I ask you to. Both men washed their hands and stripped off from the waist up. Roger reminded Rocky that he could stay dressed, but Rocky said if Roger had to stand the cold, then he would too. Roger was touched and shook Rocky's hand. Putting on long rubber gloves, he got up ready to offer aid. Soaking the twine, he squatted down behind the doe. She seemed all in and past worrying. Roger talked softly to her the entire time he was working inside her. His hand reached in and put the twine on a leg. Passing the twine to Rocky, he had him pull slowly and gently while he pushed on the fawn. Rocky could see the deer inside moving into better position, and the hoof emerged. Okay, stop pulling and give me some slack. Roger took off the twine and went back in for another leg. Didn't take long for the other leg to show when the mother took over. The fawn was born without any further aid. Roger butts over some fresh water and alfalfa, then retreated, allowing mother and child to get acquainted. Roger washed his hands and dumped the water down the ground sink. He and Rocky got dressed and walked to the house. "And I can't thank you enough for helping me out, Sheriff." Rocky grinned at the memory of the experience he just had. "Anytime, but since I was there at the birth of a new family member, you can call me Rocky." Rocky was invited inside, but to a meal, but he had to decline. "It's a long way and slow driving. Better be heading back into town before it gets too late." Roger again thanked Rocky and went inside. Sitting in the car waiting for it to warm up again, Rocky thought about the day that it had been a full one. He radioed into Talbot. The sign was up, and he had to put a padlock on the gate. Rocky thanked Talbot and sent him back home. "I'll be closing up shop and head home myself. Before you sign off, do me a favor and patch me through to Morgan. I want to see if he needs anything." Julia answered with a tone of exasperation in her voice. "Oh, we're fine, Rocky, but your father-in-law is outside next door chopping wood, wearing only a sweater, gloves, and a scarf. I tell you, there's no reasoning with that man when he gets determined." Rocky grinned, knowing full well just how stubborn his father-in-law could be. "I'll swing by on my way home and take over." Julia thanked him and went to stand by the window, looking at Morgan chopping wood as if it was the best game in the world. The next day was Talbot's day for being in the office and around town. Agnes, contrary to what Rocky claimed, had a cold coming on and was tucked in bed, being as much of a child as her father. Rocky spent the day taking care of her and Mary. Of the two, Mary was less trouble. Talbot was wrapped up and ready to head out. He transferred the phone to Rocky's home and left for the morning run. Instead of taking the car, he decided to walk. The co-op was open and doing a fair business for such a cold day. Popped in to talk for a while. It was a good place to catch the latest news, and if anyone needed help, he'd hear about it here. He made notes on who had called for items to be delivered. Scott came in panting from doing the call and headed over to the counter to collect items to be delivered. He was handed a box, which Talbot took from him. "You rested well. I'll take these around. You look all in." Scott thanked him emphatically. He'd been on the go all morning and was tired and half frozen. Talbot looked at the list and began the deliveries. Most were cold medicines, a few were lotions for aches and pains, and the rest were snacks to lighten the mood of everyone in the house. And almost every package was a pack of cards or some small game, anything to relieve the boredom of being confined. Deliveries finished, he stopped back at the co-op to check on any other deliveries. Scott had warmed up, had a cup of soup in the manager's office, and then took the rest of the calls himself. Talbot headed over to the hot dog hut. He'd had a large breakfast before heading out to the office, but cold weather always made him hungry. Rocky and Talbot always made it a habit of stopping by the hot dog hut on a regular basis. It did a swift turnover and was a very profitable place and a prime location for thieves to hit. For some reason, Rocky or Talbot always seemed to arrive right at the time a thief would hit the place. As if on cue, a cry of robbery was heard. Talbot walked with long strides to cover the remaining distance. His authoritative cries of "halt" spurred the man into a sprint. This was exactly what Talbot had been hoping for. Unbeknownst to the thief, the sneakers had been left on all night before. Rocky had seen them on this final round, called it in, and someone came out to turn them off. What they hadn't done was check the sidewalk and street for ice. When Talbot had come in, he had passed the field and noticed a sheen of ice everywhere. He called it in, but the county trucks were taking care of the main roads and wouldn't get to this side street until later. The man started well with a running leap from the hut. They had tossed salt on the sidewalk around them. He could get a good grip, but it didn't last. Talbot was taking more long strides towards the man, going faster walking than he would have by running. The thief made it to the icy patch, and that's when the fun began. Once, when Rocky and Talbot were having lunch across the street from Joe's garage, they had seen Joe slip on an oil spill. He spent a few moments running in place, then glided around the bay like a figure skater. This person wasn't as adept at slippery surfaces and was running in place, looking over his shoulder and trying to gain speed. Talbot was walking like a penguin on the slippery surface. He was having a hard time since he was also laughing at the criminal's antics. A hand on the man's shoulder made him slow down and stop. Talbot grabbed his coat and pulled him to a solid sidewalk. The man tried to bolt as soon as he felt a secure footing. Talbot lifted him off his feet and reminded him he was under arrest. Cuffed and relieved of his ill-gotten gains, he spent an hour in jail waiting to be picked up. The manager of the hot dog hut came by, preferred charges against the man, and took his money to the hut again. He was thinking that he needed to install drop safes near each of his registers. He was fed up with being robbed on a semi-regular basis. It wasn't fair on his employees either. The man was picked up and Talbot was free to continue his round. He was approaching a house at the end of the street when he saw a small figure sitting on the steps. Getting closer, he saw a small child of about 4 shivering in the cold. He brought the car to a skidding halt and leapt out. Picked up the child and rang the doorbell. The female who answered had about 6 other children inside, and they were different enough that he could see she had a home daycare. Hey, I found this one outside, sitting on your stoop. They one of yours? He was late, she said abruptly and tried to shut the door. Talbot held the door ajar with his foot. I don't care if he was late or not. You can't leave a kid out on the cold. Well, his parents know the rules. He was late. Again, she tried to close the door, kicking Talbot's foot to move it. Now, this time she succeeded and Talbot was left holding the child, who was looking at him with frightened eyes. He considered his options. Kicking the door was his favorite, but maybe not the best idea. He was also tempted to haul her in for child endangerment, but what about the other children? He brought the child into the squad car and drove off. Stopping back at the hot dog hut, he got the child a hot chocolate and went through his bag. He was hoping for some sort of identification, some way to find out who this boy's parents were. In the pack were some snacks, which he handed over to the boy, several picture books, a stuffed bear, and a child's wallet. In the wallet were 2 pennies, a stick of gum, and a card. The card was a business card. Mr. John Mulligan, Thompson's Insurance, 231 Main Street. Crossing his fingers, he drove to the insurance company. He debated a moment on whether or not to leave the child in the car or bring him along. Well, he took the child inside with him. Mr. Mulligan was working at a desk at the rear of the office. The receptionist looked up and saw the boy. Jimmy, what are you doing here? And what have you been doing that you're with the sheriff? Jimmy was leaning towards the receptionist with arms stretched out. Apparently the child was well known in this place. Handing Jimmy over, he asked to speak to Mr. Mulligan. She pointed out the desk, and sitting Jimmy on her lap, she went back to work. Mr. Mulligan looked up, and seeing the sheriff, offered him a seat. Well, is this a professional call, or should I call my lawyer? The question was said with a grin, but the grin faded when Talbot maintained his firm expression. Looking past the man, he saw a picture of Jimmy on the bookcase behind him. Comfortable he had the right man, he explained his presence. Sir, while on my rounds, I passed Jimmy's daycare, or babysitter. Jimmy was sitting outside in the cold, and when I tried to have him taken inside, I was told he couldn't come in because he was late. Changing the child's father was almost frightening. Told that his son had been sitting out in the cold since he had left him made him furious. Well, she took him inside and then must have pushed him back out as soon as I left. Hell, I was only 2 minutes late. That's all. Deputy, can I press charges for child endangerment or whatever fits the case? Talbot thought about it. Sir, I want you to take this child to be checked at the hospital. He probably has frostbite if he's been out there very long. They do find anything because she has done this, file charges. If you want, you could also sue her and stop her keeping kids anymore. He got swiftly up, sliding on his coat as he told the receptionist that he had to take his son to the hospital. The boy was holding on to Sue and the receptionist. Mr. Mulligan gently took his son away and headed out the door. Jimmy waved goodbye, saying, "Bye, Mom." Ella grinned. Sue was hiding in face, blushing. Looking at Talbot's grin, she explained, "I'm not his mom. Just that James brings him in often. Jimmy plays by my desk, but he's here." She looked wistfully back at Mulligan's desk. "I wouldn't mind being his mom, though." Free to continue his check on the area, Talbot drove further out. He had to keep a tight rein on his emotions because he was fuming at what the lady had done to the child. He decided to wait until the children were picked up and then take her in charge. He'd seen the child out there, brought him into the door, and she had refused to take him inside. Since she knew him and had the responsibility to care for him, she was in every sense in loco parentis. He nodded decisively. He'd head over at 1500 and wait up down the street. He'd counted 6 children there. He slapped his hand on the wheel. That was it. He spun the car around and headed to the office. He needed to check on something. He'd already done some research since Michaela was thinking on taking some children to earn some extra money for herself. Talbot had asked how many, and she had said she wouldn't be able to handle more than 4. In the office, he pulled out the regulations he had asked for and reread the limits. Over 6, and you had to be licensed. Jimmy was the 7th. She wasn't licensed, and it was a first-degree misdemeanor. Fines for that were up to $1,000. Well, he'd do his part, and if she ever repeated their offense, she'd get jail time. He finished his run, checked the office, and at 1500 was parked down the block from the operator's home. One by one, he watched his parents pick up their children. He counted them as they departed. 6 had left the home. He got out and walked to the house when the last car drove off. The name on the mailbox read Tavern. Ms. Tavern opened the door and came outside, wrapping a scarf around her neck. Talbot made long strides to catch her before she made it down the steps. At the sight of the sheriff swiftly approaching, she bolted for the door. The key shook in her hand, and she only managed to open the door when he was right behind her. She tried to enter, and slammed the door shut, but only managed the first 2. Talbot followed her inside. "Sorry for the intrusion, but I need to see your license," she scoffed. "I only have 8 kids on a regular basis. This isn't a school, so I don't need a license. Hell, I've been doing this for 4 years and it ain't ever been a problem. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it." She reached for the door, but Talbot already had the cuffs on her. Slapped them as she reached out. "The limit is 6, and you've just admitted you've been operating for 4 years without that license. You also left a child in 30-degree weather outside your doorstep. That is a child endangerment. I'm going to have to place you under arrest. We're going to the courthouse." This Tavern tried to faint. Walking in front of Talbot in cuffs, she acted as if she was a frail woman being abused by the sheriff. Well, her neighbors must have known her well. Not one person stepped outside to her defense. In the courthouse, she was formally charged and fined. That's $500 for the 2 charges, or 10 days in jail. She pulled out her wallet and counted out the $500. Talbot wrote her a receipt. I want you to understand that your stone dry will be checking periodically. If we find you operating without a license again, it will go from a misdemeanor to a felony, and it will mean 30 days in the county jail. To hell with that. I'm shutting down today. Those parents get nobody to take their kids. You could explain why. She stood by the door waiting. Talbot looked up with raised eyebrows. Well, we're finished. You can leave now. Well, aren't you going to give me a drive back? It's almost a mile walk in this cold. It'll take me a long time. Talbot was not sympathetic. So it's about the same time, the amount of time that poor kid was out in the same cold. His cold glare was a match and more, so for the cold that greeted her outside. Mr. Murphy called later in the day saying that his son did indeed have frostbite and he was suing her for the cost of the hospital visit and his son's emotional distress. Talbot was pleased. Well, if you need a witness, give me a call. At home, Kayla was eagerly opening an envelope. Just to be on the safe side, she had applied for a license and been approved. Her home was about to become a daycare, and she couldn't have been happier. Talbot hugged her. Better get the word out and into the paper. I hear there are going to be a few parents needing a place by tomorrow. I'm trying to see if I got the kind of a quickie one. I think we'll tack that on to the next reading. So I'm getting a little short of breath. So that's it for today. I'm going to put a bookmark in here. So that's it. I do appreciate you being here. Hope you'll be here on Friday, and we will get going on the next 2 chapters. And that's kind of a fun one because Joe gets to play around with Rocky's truck and add a whole bunch of interesting little gadgets to it. So he gets kind of a comic James Bond type thing going. So I look forward to reading that to you. And the one after that deals with the big snowstorm that hits town. So, and all the problems that causes. So from cold to lots of snow, it's not going to be an easy winter for these guys. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. I look forward to seeing you again on Friday. So that's it for today. Be good and be good to yourself. Bye.